يرجى من الحضور الكرام العودة إلى مقاعدهم. يرجى من الحضور الكرام العودة إلى مقاعدهم. Ladies and gentlemen, please come back to your seats. يسر اللجنة المنظمة للقمة العالمية للمرأة دعوتكم لحضور حفل عشاء الليلة الإماراتية بفندق قصر الإمارات أبو ظبي وزيارة جامع الشيخ زايد الكبير. السيدات والسادة، نود التنبيه بأن التصوير سيكون ممنوع منعاً باتا خلال كلمة الشيخة الدكتورة موزة بن طحنون آل نهيان. السيدات والسادة، نرحب بكم من جديد في القمة العالمية للمرأة. والآن ندعو الشيخة الدكتورة موزة بن طحنون بن محمد آل نهيان، مستشارة في وزارة الخارجية والتعاون الدولي الإمارات العربية المتحدة، فلتتفضل مشكورة.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، الحضور الكريم، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. يطيب لي في البداية أن أرحب بكم جميعاً في العاصمة أبو ظبي، وأرحب كذلك بجميع القائمين على إعداد وإنجاح هذه القمة التي تجمع أمثلة يحتذى بها من النساء الناجحات في شتى المجالات. واسمحوا لي أن أنتهز هذه الفرصة لأتقدم بوافر الشكر وعميق الامتنان إلى الوالدة الغالية سمو الشيخة فاطمة بنت مبارك، رئيسة الاتحاد النسائي العام، الرئيس الأعلى لمؤسسة التنمية الأسرية، رئيسة المجلس الأعلى للأمومة والطفولة، أم الإمارات حفظها الله ورعاها، على رعاية القمة العالمية للمرأة وعلى دعمها المستمر لتعزيز دور المرأة والارتقاء بقدراتها وتمكينها على المستويين الوطني والدولي. وسنركز في هذه الجلسة على أهمية التعليم، والذي يعد جزءاً لا يتجزأ من مرحلة تمكين المرأة والنهوض بها. وكما جاء في الوثيقة العالمية لحقوق الإنسان إن تعليم المرأة يعتبر حقاً مشروعاً لها، وأحد أهم السبل الحتمية للحياة الكريمة. وفي دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة يشكل تعليم المرأة أحد العناصر الرئيسية في مسيرة النهضة الحضارية التي أرسى دعائمها الوالد المغفور له بإذن الله تعالى الشيخ زايد بن سلطان آل نهيان طيب الله ثراه، حيث شكلت الدولة نموذجاً يحتذى به لنهضة المرأة عربياً وإقليمياً ودولياً. وفي هذا السياق تشكل النساء حوالي 70% من جميع خريجي الجامعات، خاصة في مجالات العلوم والتكنولوجيا والهندسة والرياضيات. كما تمثل النساء حوالي 44% من جميع الباحثين في الدولة. وتم ذلك كله بدعم وتشجيع الوالدة سمو الشيخة فاطمة بنت مبارك أم الإمارات حفظها الله ورعاها، إيماناً منها بأهمية دور المرأة وضرورة مشاركتها في مسيرة التنمية. وأقتبس كلماتي هنا من أقوال سموها: إن التنمية بمعناها الحقيقي هي النهوض بالمجتمع عن طريق الإنتاج وعدالة التوزيع، وتحقيق ذلك يتطلب ضمان المساواة، والمساواة بكل فخر مكفولة للمرأة في دولة الإمارات. الضيوف الكرام، لا زالت تواجه بعض النساء في عالمنا المعاصر تحديات مختلفة تعيقهن من الحصول على التعليم. ووفقاً لمنظمة الأمم المتحدة للتربية والعلوم والثقافة اليونسكو، تمثل النساء 35% فقط من جميع الطلاب المسجلين في المجالات المتعلقة بالعلوم والتكنولوجيا والهندسة والرياضيات على مستوى العالم. ومن هذا المنطلق أقر مجلس حقوق الإنسان التابع للأمم المتحدة بالإجماع في يونيو 2017 مشروع قرار قدمته دولة الإمارات للمجلس بشأن ضمان حق الفتيات في الحصول على التعليم. وعلى المستوى الدولي تعهدت الدولة في عام 2021 بتقديم 100 مليون دولار أمريكي لصالح الشراكة العالمية من أجل التعليم لدعم استراتيجية 2025 لبرامج التعليم في الدول النامية، تقدم على مدار السنوات الخمس اللاحقة من 2021 إلى 2025. كما استضافت الدولة في نفس العام القمة العالمية ريوايرد للتعليم لتنسيق التعاون الدولي في إعادة صياغة مشهد التعليم من أجل مستقبل مزدهر ومستدام. ولدي ثقة بأن ما سيتم التوصل إليه خلال هذه القمة من نتائج وتوصيات سيمثل نقطة فارقة في مرحلة تحقيق الأهداف التي نتطلع إليها جميعاً، وذلك بمواجهة كافة القضايا والتحديات التي تواجه المرأة في عالمنا المعاصر. واسمحوا لي في الختام أستذكر مقولة الوالدة سمو الشيخة فاطمة بنت مبارك أم الإمارات حفظها الله ورعاها، بأن التعليم هو النافذة التي تطل منها المرأة على حضارة الأمم، وهو وسيلتنا لمواكبة مسيرة التطور والتقدم واستمرار النهوض بمجتمعنا. والله الموفق، ولكم مني جزيل الشكر والامتنان، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
نشكر الشيخة الدكتورة موزة بن طحنون بن محمد آل نهيان على كلمتها الموقرة. السيدات والسادة، نبدأ معكم الجلسة الثالثة تحت عنوان القيادات النسائية في التعليم والبحث العلمي، ترأس الجلسة الدكتورة كريمة المزروعي مستشارة مدير جامعة محمد بن زايد للعلوم الإنسانية الإمارات العربية المتحدة. المتحدثون في الجلسة معالي كلوديانا إيكول وزيرة التعليم الأساسي والثانوي غامبيا، الدكتورة جاكي أرميجو بروفيسور زائر للدراسات الآسيوية جامعة هاواي الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية، الدكتورة بيبي ليو أستاذ سياسات الطاقة والزراعة البيئية جامعة نانجينغ الصين.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يسعدني أن تختم جلسات اليوم بموضوع مهم جدا وهو موضوع التعليم. وعندما يأتي الموضوع إلى التعليم فإننا نتحدث هنا عن قصص حقيقية ونتحدث عن تجارب حقيقية. لماذا التعليم؟ دعوني أخبركم عندما نبدأ هذه الجلسة بقصة قصيرة، هي قصة أختي مريم، والتي كانت من أوائل خريجات جامعة الإمارات العربية المتحدة. عندما كانت أختي مريم، وهي الدفعة الأولى التي تخرجت من الجامعة، عندما كانت تعود كل أسبوع من الجامعة كانت تخبرنا عن هذا العالم المثالي الذي يسمى الجامعة، حيث تصرف لهم رواتب كانت أعلى من الراتب الذي تأخذه أمي في المنزل، وكانت تصرف لهم الملابس والسكن والمواصلات، وتعطى لهم كسوة الصيف والشتاء، وكانوا يسافرون صيفاً في رحلات استكشافية تعليمية، حتى أنها كانت تخبرنا بأن حتى علب الخياطة والأكل الذي لم نسمع به قبلاً كان يعطى للطالبات في الجامعة تشجيعاً من المغفور له بإذن الله الشيخ زايد بن سلطان آل نهيان عليه رحمة الله. وعندما عملنا في سلك التعليم عرفنا بحرص الشيخ زايد حتى قبل الاتحاد بأكثر من 20 عام على دخول المرأة المدرسة، حتى أنه كان يتحدث مع شيوخ القبائل ويتحدث مع الأسر إذا تغيبت الفتاة عن التعليم. وبدأ برنامج ابتعاث وغيرها مما يدعم المرأة في التعليم، فتح مدارس الإناث المستقلة حتى لا يعترض أحد على تعليم البنات. وجاءت أمسكت بيده منذ البداية الشيخة فاطمة بنت مبارك حفظها الله، ودعمت المرأة في التعليم، جمعية المرأة الظبيانية، دروس لكبار السن، حتى محيت الأمية. وعندما تقرؤون تقارير الدول في التعليم في الورلد بانك أو الOECD أو غيرها من المنظمات فستجدون أن دولة الإمارات من الأعلى عالمياً في تعليم المرأة. لماذا؟ لماذا حرص رئيس دولة على تعليم فتاة؟ ولماذا حرصت زوجته على تعليم فتاة بالذات؟ ولماذا حرصا أن يطرقا الأبواب حتى يتأكدا من تعليم الفتاة؟ ما الذي يحدث حين لا تتعلم الفتاة؟ وما هي التجارب التي تحدث حين لا تكون القصة دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة؟ أتذكر عندما زرنا بعض مخيمات اللاجئين كانت جهود الشيخة فاطمة واضحة في تمكين تعليم الفتيات، في حتى تعليمهم الخياطة وغيرها من المهارات. التعليم ليس فك الرموز فقط، وإنما التعليم حفظ كرامة. التعليم يعطي المرأة قوة الاختيار وقوة تحديد المصير، وهي ما تحتاجه المرأة. فما هي القصة في الدول الأخرى؟ وما هي التجارب التي نتحدث عنها والتي لا تكتب على السبورة؟ هذا ما سوف نتحدث عنه اليوم مع أصحاب المعالي ضيوفنا الكرام. ولدينا كلمة قصيرة من وزيرة التعليم التي لم تتمكن من الحضور اليوم، سوف تكون في نهاية الجلسة. اسمحوا لي الآن أنتقل إلى اللغة الإنجليزية لأرحب بضيوفي. Your Excellency، معاليها معالي كلوديانا كول، Minister of Basic and Secondary Education في غامبيا. Your Excellency, so we heard a lot of success narratives in many countries. And we know that education is now discussing the employability of GPT in education and how it can be used and employed, and how artificial intelligence actually is now dominating. So what's your take? What's your narrative about education and science for the girls in your area?
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Your Royal Highness, Your Excellencies, distinguished personalities, ladies and gentlemen, all other protocols respectfully observed. I am from the Gambia, a small country on the west coast of Africa, and usually called the Smiling Coast of West Africa. It's a tourist destination, and you're all invited to visit. However, I'm indeed honored and delighted to be invited to this significantly important global summit of women to deliberate on a very important topic that is so vital to our present circumstances and for the transformation of our respective countries. It is the general standard and norm that the world over to recognize gender equality not only as a human right, but a prerequisite that is essential in ensuring that we promote sustainable development, which is critical in mainstreaming peace around the world. However, there still exists some discrimination and stereotypes that prevent women and girls from having equal access to education, especially in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, which is now known as STEM. In spite of the critical roles that women play in the advancement of science and technology, as well as engineering, evidence abound to show that despite the gains in gender parity in many fields, in most countries around the world, gender disparity still exists and very much pronounced in the STEM area, particularly in developing countries like my country, the Gambia, where these fields are urgently needed to trigger and enhance sustainable development. The future of our world stands on a very strong footing on scientific and technological process. Only when women and girls, who constitute over 51% of the world population, are inclusive in being among creators, owners, and leaders of science, technology, and innovations. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, women leadership in education and science, especially in developing countries, context is absolutely critical and urgent if we want to bridge the gender gap in science, technology, engineering, and maths-based subjects. These are critical to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. While I advocate for equal access to education, especially in the STEM subjects, it is important to know that each subject area in education is vital in the attainment of the SDGs and other priority areas. Nonetheless, before the past 2 decades, the field has been dominated by males, while females have been considered as only good for the art subjects. We had that earlier. According to data from UNESCO Institute for Statistics, women world researchers constitute less than 30%. However, a few women around the world have managed to excel in the STEM field and have managed to have their names listed in the books. We read of Professor Kwarisha Abdul Karim, an epidemiologist of South Africa, Dr. Uzak Esu of Nigeria, who is among the top 50 women under 35 years of age in engineering. We also read about Dr. Margaret Mugarora of Uganda, a medical practitioner, and Dr. Julie Makani, a Tanzanian researcher, among many others, not forgetting Madam Makiru Kaira of the Gambia, who is a pharmacist, and Madam Maimuna Mende, who is a medical researcher, both of them living in the Gambia. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is now evident that many governments have prioritized girls in science education at the hem of their education development agenda. In their quest to empower women as a means of meeting the demands of the 21st century, there is enough evidence in many government commitments to mainstream gender in the creation of opportunities for all to acquire literacy, livelihood skills, and the utilization of these skills in order to enhance their livelihoods and become economically self-reliant members of their communities, as stated in the 2016-2030 Sustainable Development Goals. Cognizant of the significance of science as a critical enabler of the three dimensions of sustainable development, that is economic growth, social development, and environmental sustainability, my ministry, for example, has implemented numerous interventions geared towards the advancement of girls in the STEM discipline. Despite all the development challenges caused by COVID-19 pandemic and the economic constraints, the government of the Gambia has taken positive steps to empower girls as a means of building a critical mass of women scientists through numerous developmental and educational programs. Among them, we have the program to encourage girls to opt for science to bridge the gender gap. Provision of sponsorships for girls who are excelling in the sciences. We also organize science clinics for girls that expose them to critical thinking, group work, communication, and technological literacy and innovation. There is also the robotics education, which emphasizes on girls as instituted in upper basic and senior secondary schools. This activity is in line with the global academic competences, where students are introduced to coding programs, line tracing, 3D printing, and obstacle avoidance. Girls in senior secondary schools are given the opportunity to take part in international competitions, which they have won and brought glory to the country.
You have 2 minutes, Your Excellency.
My ministry also offers scholarships to female teachers to build their capacity at the university in STEM subjects so that they could go back and be role models and scientists. Now, to name a few, these are within the 21st century skills that are put in place to strengthen girls and women in STEM education. Madam Chairperson, ladies and gentlemen, I would therefore like to invite partnership in providing the necessary resources that will be needed to attain these goals. The budget of my country gives a lot to education. But education is expensive, and it requires a lot of resources, particularly in the STEM education that is required for the inclusion, quality education that will create women leaders in education and science who would push the country forward for economic growth and sustainable development, as no nation can develop in the absence of their women. I thank you for your very kind attention.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Very powerful points. Thank you very much. So I would like to introduce Dr. Jackie. Is it Armijo? Armijo. Visiting Professor, Center for Global Asia, New York University in Shanghai. Actually, what Her Excellency just mentioned, talked about, she just mentioned the power of educating women and how do women do in STEM. But education comes with a price, comes with a pressure. So Jackie, who's behind every woman? And do you have some stories to tell us or to share with us about all the pressures that women go through from personal perspective, lesson learned, things that we need to take away with us when we leave here?
Okay, thank you. I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me, and I'd like to thank Sheikh Fatima bin Mubarak for being the inspiration, not only for this event, but for so many things that have happened here in the UAE. I'm going to speak both as somebody who, finished my PhD in a rather challenging fashion, but also somebody who's been a professor for about 35 years now. And whenever possible, I try and teach at women's universities. I want to explain why. But first, I want to say about trying to finish my own dissertation. My field of expertise is the history of Islam in China. That field did not exist when I started my PhD, and I ended up doing my PhD at Harvard because they had both very good Islamic studies and very good Chinese studies, but nobody there who knew anything about Islam in China. So I went off and tried to do a year's worth of research in Southwest China because I had a 6-month-old and a 2.5-year-old at home, and I was trying to get a year's worth of research done in 2 months. But after only a week in China, I realized I had to just move there. So I convinced my husband to let me bring a baby and a 2.5-year-old to China, and we ended up staying for 4 years. So I remember it was not easy, especially at that moment in time. Friends in big cities like Shanghai and Beijing were like, "Oh my God, you're moving there? Are you insane?" And with these 2 little kids, I'm like, "It'll be fine." But I do remember after being there for several months by myself, I was just riding my bike across town, and the thought for the first time occurred to me, if a friend had asked me, "Jackie, I'm thinking about moving to a remote part of China with a 6-month-old and a 2.5-year-old. What do you think?" I would have said, "Are you insane?" But honestly, it had never occurred to me. This was important for my research. I figured it was possible. And as a result, my kids basically grew up in China. The younger one, her first language was Chinese. And it was an amazing experience for them, for which I'm very thankful. My point being here, it's amazing what you can do if you just, so to speak, go for it. And yes, it's not easy, but oftentimes the most challenging things you face are the most important. When I finished my dissertation, I stayed on, and one of the projects I worked on was interviewing Chinese Muslims who had continued their education. And again and again and again, I found myself interviewing Chinese Muslim women who had volunteered to teach at the poorest, most remote villages. And I was just struck by how determined they were to provide an education to the people who were most vulnerable in their own communities, often traveling distances far away from their own families. And back then, actually, transportation in China now is extraordinary, but back then it was not nearly as developed. But anyway, so one day I finally asked one of the women I was interviewing, "How is it that you are willing to give up so much to basically live in this very small, poor village to be a teacher?" And she said to me, I'll just say one phrase in Chinese, which is, 教育一个男孩，就是教育一个人；教育一个女孩，就是教育大家, which means like you educate a boy, you educate an individual. You educate a girl, you basically educate everybody. And as this was mentioned earlier by one of the other speakers today, and actually the World Bank spent millions of dollars trying to figure this out themselves. And in fact, at the end of the day, educating a girl is the most beneficial thing you can do in pretty much any society in the world. One of the things I do want to mention is the importance of giving women voice. Earlier we talked about trying to build women's confidence. In my own classroom, so when I was a graduate student, there was a study done, and they were trying to figure out at Harvard why it was that male students tended to dominate most seminar discussions. And as we all know, learning to speak clearly and eloquently in a group environment is incredibly important in terms of building confidence and getting your points across. So they studied hundreds of hours of videotapes of classroom discussions. And what they discovered is that although professors call on male and female students, about 50-50, what happens is when a female student goes to answer the question the professor's asked or make a point, more often than not, a male student will interrupt. And the male student will either have figured out what the point that the female student wants to make is, and basically make it themselves and take credit for it, or just interrupts so that she doesn't get to make her point and changes the topic. But if anybody who's been in any meeting everywhere knows this is what happens. So in my own classroom, from the first year I taught, and I was teaching Harvard undergrads in the beginning, I had a rule in my classroom, absolutely no interruptions. And only a few years ago, after the Me Too movement had started, they were doing research on women in work in Silicon Valley. And lo and behold, when they asked women what was the biggest problem they faced, it was basically at meetings, they're not heard. One of the advantages of a women's college, so when I finished at Harvard, I was teaching I had a postdoc at Stanford, and I was teaching there, and I had an opportunity to move here to the UAE. So 20 years ago exactly, pretty much, I moved to the UAE to teach at a women's university, Zayed University. Zayed was only open a few years then, and back then it was entirely women. And one of the reasons I really wanted to do that was because I strongly believe in women's education. I believe that especially at the college level, it's extremely important that women have the opportunity to basically be surrounded by women, in part so they don't get used to being interrupted by men and thinking that it's okay. Later, I worked at another women's university in Bangladesh. Again, that was another experience which is very challenging but also extraordinarily rewarding. And I was teaching at a small college there called Asian University for Women. And we had students from all across Asia, from the smallest villages in remote parts of Afghanistan and Pakistan to students who came from the refugee camps in Gaza, students from Syria, Yemen, Sri Lanka, Bhutan. I mean, it was just an extraordinary university. And one of the many wonderful things about it was that the students got to meet and interact with students from such an extraordinary range of places. And as people have mentioned also today, intercultural communication. It seems very simple, but in fact it's extremely important. And it was very rewarding teaching at not only a women's university, but at a women's university in which so many different voices were heard.
We have 2 minutes to go.
Okay. One thing I wanted to mention of somebody else earlier, because we're asked to speak practically today. Somebody earlier mentioned domestic violence and how, especially during COVID, it became more severe. But one thing I do want everybody, one lesson I want to know, in addition to making sure whenever you're in charge in a meeting, have a no interruptions rule. But the second thing is, it's very hard to stop violence against women, domestic violence. But apparently, the best indicator is if a woman owns her own home. There's the matrilocal society in Indonesia, it's called the Minangkabau, where the woman, when a couple gets married, they live in the woman's home. The woman owns the home. They have one of the lowest domestic violence rates in the world. The late Sultan Qaboos from Oman, he started a program in which he gave loans to women to buy their own homes. And people in Oman said, what? Because normally these loans go to men when they get married. And he quoted that study, saying that when women own their homes, they're much less likely to be victims of domestic violence. So those are the main things I wanted to get across today.
Thank you very much, Jackie. Thank you. I've been to too many conferences, international, national, regional, in my life. I never actually was part in a conference where I heard any man talking about work-life balance and how to create a life-work balance for me as a man. I always hear women trying to fight to find their work-life balance. So all the stereotype roles that were imposed on women and inherited and carried out with women, and when she was empowered, actually additional roles were assigned to her, where actually maybe men were not assigned similar roles. And this is actually what we like to hear today from Professor Bibi Liu, professor from Nanjing University in China. So what's your take actually in life-work balance for both men and women?
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Highnessy, Your Excellency, and distinguished guest. And thank you, Chair, for giving me the chance to talk. Just think about what's the meaning of sharing. Before we get to the stage, I talked with Jackie, and Jackie mentioned that the first time she visited Shanghai was in 1980s. At that time, I was just born. So after he shared his whole story, I was so empowered and inspired. I can feel that it's the meaning of sharing. So I'm honored to discuss the self-development, the life-work balance by sharing my own experience as examples. So let me introduce myself. My name is Bei Liu, a professor of School of the Environment, Nanjing University. Could you please go back to the first slide? 就往前一页。Nanjing University is the top university in China, and I work in the field of environment, energy, and agricultural policy and management. Here is my Twitter code. As a research of sustainability, I try to go paperless as far as I can. If you have interest, you can scan it. So 下一页, next page. Okay. So as a woman today, we speak different languages. Just get to know that Jackie speaks very beautiful Chinese also. Yes. So we always think about. We have a request that is who we are as women. For example, who am I? Next, 下一个. Yes, you can look at it. I have different identities. I'm a wife to my husband. I'm a mother to my son, and I'm a daughter to my parents. I'm so lucky that all of them are around me. Very healthy and happy. And for the society, I work as a female professor. Here is my Google Scholar code. If you have interest in my research, just scan it. And I also am a friend of my friends, my sisters. So 下一页. So because there are a lot of Korean women here, so I want to start with my work part. That's how to develop my career. I think different people have different ways to develop their careers. There's no standard answer. But for me, in my view, that is, if I want to develop my career, I need to connect my career with the development of my country, and I want to contribute to the development of the whole society. I mean, our human beings. So I want to start with an old Chinese saying that is the 仓廪实而知礼节. That is, if the agricultural production goes better, the governance become easier. So we can see that food security is very important to any nations, for China and also for all the countries, because feed the people is always give the highest priority, right? But agriculture sectors is always, get a lot of criticism because agriculture production will cause a lot of environment problems. For example, it will use a lot of water, discharge a lot of pollutions, as well as use a lot of fertilizers, which bring a lot of impacts to the environment. So it looks like there's a huge trade-off between the food security and environment sustainability. So what we are working on is to, we just published a paper in Nature Fruit last year. What we want to do is to develop those useful policies and strategies to build up the synergies among the food security, their farmers' profitability, that is very important for individuals, and their agricultural sustainability, especially under the situation of climate change. So, 下一页. So this is an example we are doing. We just finished. Also, the paper was published in Nature Fruit the year before. That is, we found that the China government want to diversify their step foods. For example, they include the potato, into the portfolio of the step food. This action, and combined with their technological development, will reduce the carbon, land, water impacts, and at the time they achieve the food security. So it's very important for us to know, because it is always overlooked in the past year, and we also can inform those nations, developing nations, to include more localized food and diverse their step food to achieve their agricultural sustainability. So this is just an example we are doing, that is combine our career development with the needs of our country and of the whole world. Okay, 下一页. So we do think that if we want to develop our career well, that means we need a very supportive, very good research group. You can look at this picture. This is my research group. It's quite balanced, gender balanced. Young ladies and gentlemen, they work together. There's no situation happened. Jackie just mentioned that maybe male has louder voice. No, they have equal voice. And also, it's very important that we have a very professional network that we can share ideas. Also, we can share those lessons and difficulties that make us feel not alone. And these days, in our university, for example, we female professors also join together to have fight for those gender equality. Fight for gender rights, gender equality. That's a very good start, I think. So, 下一页.
We have 2 minutes to go.
Okay, 2 minutes. Right, that's fine. Okay, so here come to the family support. This is a last, but this is very important. My husband is also a school professor. She's very proud of his wife. He said, "Wow, my wife is so good." Actually, in his mind. And my son, now he's a primary school student. And he's tolerant, because sometimes for moms, they call helicopter mom, you should do this, you should do that. But my son is very tolerant. Before I come to this event, they know that I will be a speaker. They say, "Wow, try your best, you can do it very well." I want to let them know that, Gordon, Michael, yes, I can do it very well. So the most important thing is that we have shared values, we support each other, and we work hard together. Today we have time to share our own stories. I think we can inspire each other, and we can build a very beautiful future. 下一页.
Thank you.
This is me, Bei Bei Liu from
Thank you very
Nanjing
much,
University.
Professor.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I would like to welcome to the stage the representative who will deliver the speech of Her Excellency Nancy Chuala Maduko, the Deputy Minister for Education in Malawi. Please.
Thank you very much. Good evening and good afternoon, everybody. Let me introduce myself. My name is Dr. Ehlimana Memicevic, and I'm from Bosnia and Herzegovina. I was asked by the organizer to read this message from Honorable Deputy Nancy Choa Madoko, and I will gladly do it. So let us start. Distinguished fellow honorable ministers, all other distinguished dignitaries, technical expert, organizer of this event, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Let me begin by expressing my profound gratitude to the organizer for the kind invitation extended to the Ministry of Education of Malawi to participate at this very important event and for the careful selection and well thought out theme for this meeting, namely, quote, future strategies of education, inclusion and equality for the unprivileged, which I am and a quote, which I'm here to address. My presentation is centered on the following key issues from the Malawi perspective. First, current conditions and challenging for teaching and learning in unprivileged zones. Second, new pedagogical approaches and programs to address challenges caused by pandemic and other emergencies. And third, educational resources and capacities that are necessary to improve education, inclusion, and equality among unprivileged groups. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as a Deputy Minister of Education in Malawi, one of my duties is to promote education for all, irrespective of race, ethnicity, gender, religion, disability, or any other discriminatory characteristics. In fact, this right to education is enshrined in our Constitution and cannot be derogated. To execute this duty, my ministry collaborates with many stakeholders, including development partners, to put in place relevant policies and mobilize resources that will assist in addressing numerous challenges affecting the attainment of education at all levels for all our people, to ensure equitable access, enhanced equality, improved governance, and a more resilient education system. Honorable fellow ministers, ladies and gentlemen, as I address you, I would like to put this theme of education, inclusion, and equality into context by looking closely at Malawi's current conditions and challenges in as far as teaching and learning are concerned. In most primary schools, over 100 primary school learners sit in one classroom against the recommended number of 60 students per class per government policy. In most secondary schools, it is over 60 students sitting in one classroom against the recommended number of 40 students per class. For students who successfully complete the primary education cycle, only about 40% progress to the secondary education. In fact, only 16% of secondary school-going age are in secondary. As for higher education, the gross enrollment against the population is less than 1%, and only about 50% of eligible candidates at the end of secondary level progress to the university. As of April 2022, our education system was short over for 40,000 primary classrooms and 20,000 secondary classrooms. With a high fertility rate that produces over 500,000 babies every year, not every day, the need for teaching and learning spaces will continue to grow. Ladies and gentlemen, the statistics highlighted above reflect a major challenge my ministry faces in its request to ensure equitable access to quality education. As you can appreciate, the education sector in Malawi has inadequate school infrastructure, including classrooms to absorb all eligible students. This has resulted in congestion in classrooms in some schools, resulting in makeshift classrooms. The situation becomes even worse during rainy seasons. The growing population in my country, as well as many other unprivileged countries, has correspondingly resulted in high demand for education. This demand, however, has not matched with the existing classroom learning spaces. Ladies and gentlemen, despite this situation, Malawi is committed to ensuring that every citizen attend at least 12 years of education as pronounced in the first 10-year plan called Maldivi Implementation Plan 1 of our National Development Blueprint, the Malawi 2063. To accelerate the achievement of this objective, my ministry is opening access to education through multiple pathways and flexible learning approaches using technological and innovative ways. To this effect, my ministry is promoting open, distance, and e-learning, which has exhibited potential and viable pathways for expanding access to education at all levels of education. Ladies and gentlemen, redefined learning spaces in our education system mean pursuing innovative, non-traditional ways of realizing classrooms and going beyond the four walls of the classroom through online, offline, on-air, and on-print learning opportunities. To that effect, my ministry has come up with a cost-effective classroom designs that maintain acceptable standards, but which cost about a third of a normal market price. This means that we can treble the number of the classrooms in our primary schools using the same resources that would have constructed only a third of them. With this, my ministry has embarked on a huge undertaking to construct about 4,000 classrooms in primary schools and more to increase the learning spaces with support from developing partners. Similar intervention will see more classrooms constructed in secondary school over the next 5 years. Another flexible pathway is open and digital schooling, i.e. open distance and e-learning. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to report that through foresight leadership since independence in 1946, Malawi has embraced different forms of distance education in the past 2 decades with support from partners such as the Commonwealth of Learning. Open schooling has significantly grown as an alternative legal pathway in secondary and tertiary education, although there is still more room. Now, 17% of all secondary learners are enrolled in open secondary schools, which use part of existing secondary school infrastructure in the afternoon hours, supported with self-instructional learning materials for home study. A similar percentage of students are studying through ODEL in both public and private higher education institutions in Malawi. It is our belief that if we established many open smart learning support centers in communities across the country, many students would enroll in open schooling and e-learning programs, including out-of-school youths and adults at all levels of education. Fellow Minister, ladies and gentlemen, I'm also very delighted to report that during the COVID-19 pandemic period, with support from development partners such as the Commonwealth Learning, the World Bank...
Less than 2 minutes to go.
Sorry?
Less than 2 minutes to go.
Less than?
2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay. Commonwealth of E-Learning, the World Bank, UNICEF, UNESCO, GBG Foundation and GIZ, yes, we have been able to digitalize preschool content, secondary education curriculum, and prepare teacher education to embrace e-learning. Universities have also embraced ODEL to varying degrees. Similarly, public universities, with support from our government, are introducing more ODEL programs while mainstreaming e-learning in on-campus programs. Currently, over 60% of secondary curriculum has been developed into open education resources, which are available online and offline. We are working with UNICEF Digital Public Good to complete the remaining secondary curriculum and digitalize the entire primary education curriculum. It is our hope that this initiative will be financed, and we invite the partners to support us in the digitalization of the said curricula, especially making it accessible online, offline, and on air. Teacher training institutions are expanding the delivery of education through ODEL in order to increase output in the coming few years to meet the growing demand for teachers. I suppose there is no enough time. Okay, there is still 10 more pages to read, but I will finish this with, ladies and gentlemen, we continue to redefine the learning spaces to make them more flexible, accessible, and cater for more learners, including those with special needs. So let's embrace and invest in educational technology. This is one of the sure strategies of ensuring education inclusion and equality for the unprivileged who require your unfettered support. Fellow ministers, partners, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much. أعزائي الحضور، تحدثنا اليوم حول عدة قضايا تهم تعليم الفتاة، ابتداء بمعاليها التي تحدثت حول الومن والجيرلز ان ساينس education، وبعد ذلك جاكي التي تحدثت حول كل أنواع الضغوطات البريشرز التي تتعرض لها الفتاة أثناء التعليم، وبعد ذلك بيبي ليو التي تحدثت حول كيف نخلق التوازن بين العمل وبيئة والتعليم. في الحقيقة ربما هذه الجلسات تعطينا العديد من الأفكار لنحافظ على بعضنا البعض، خصوصاً مع زيادة الفاقد التعليمي بعد كورونا، وبعد ظهور أنواع هجرات أخرى ولجوء أخرى لم تكن موجودة من قبل، خصوصاً مع الزلازل والكوارث الطبيعية التي تحدث والمايجريشن أو الهجرة التي تلازمها. سيكون هناك ضغط كبير على نظام التعليم وليس للفتيات سوانا، فربما نخرج من هنا بمبادرة أن نتبنى تعليم فتاة. قد تكون هذه الفتاة لاجئة، قد تكون هذه الفتاة فتاة نأخذها من جمعية موثوقة، قد تكون هذه الفتاة بالتعاون مع دول تحتاجنا، قد تكون هذه الفتاة ابنة عاملة معنا، ولكن ما نعرفه على وجه اليقين بأن تبنينا لتعليم فتاة سيخلق لها ليس تعليماً آخراً ولكن حياة أخرى قد تغير حياتها تماماً في المستقبل. نشكر لكم جلوسكم وانتظاركم اليوم ونتمنى لكم أمسية سعيدة.
نشكر كل من رئيسة الجلسة الدكتورة كريمة المزروعي مستشارة مدير جامعة محمد بن زايد للعلوم الإنسانية الإمارات العربية المتحدة، والمتحدثين في الجلسة معالي كلوديانا إيكول وزيرة التعليم الأساسي والثانوي غامبيا، والدكتورة جاكي أرميجو بروفيسور زائر للدراسات الآسيوية جامعة هاواي الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية. كما نشكر أيضاً الدكتورة بيبي ليو أستاذ سياسات الطاقة والزراعة البيئية جامعة نانجينغ الصين. السيدات والسادة، نعلن ختام فعاليات وجلسات اليوم الأول للقمة العالمية للمرأة. نشكر لكم حضوركم ونتطلع إلى لقائكم غداً. يسر اللجنة المنظمة للقمة العالمية للمرأة دعوتكم لحضور حفل عشاء الليلة الإماراتية بفندق قصر الإمارات أبو ظبي، وكذلك زيارة جامع الشيخ زايد الكبير. شكراً لكم.
Hello, we are invited, we're pleased actually to invite you to a tour to Sheikh Zayed Grand Mosque and to attend the Emirati Night Gala Dinner, which will take place at Abu Dhabi Emirates Palace Hotel. This will start at 5:45 p.m. today. So we are expecting you all.